In this video, we're going to have a little bit of fun and convert our game into a first-person shooter. It's going to be a real old-school style first-person shooter, similar to the original Wolfenstein or the original Doom game, where you couldn't actually look up and down. You could just, you could use the mouse, but the mouse only rotated left and right. And if any of you have ever played the original, you actually use the arrow keys to rotate in Doom and Wolfenstein, and it seems so bizarre now, but people didn't use the mouse back then. But we're going to make ours use the mouse. We're going to make it use WASD. If you haven't done that yet, very quickly, input map up here, and you can change UI left, UI right, UI up, and UI down to be WASD, as well as the arrow keys. So first thing we're going to do, we're not actually going to need our camera anymore. So we can load up our scenes here, and we can go to the test level, and you'll probably have to do this for each level, but we're going to delete that camera. Delete that camera node, and we're going to add in, we're going to edit our player. And on this player, we're going to add in a camera. So we're going to add the camera directly to the player. This is going to be, like I said, it's going to be very simple. It's not going to be like head bobbing or anything complex like that. Now I'm going to switch this into 2 viewports and do a preview on this top one, just so I can see where the camera is going to go. So I want it to be around here, and I'm going to move it forward. And by forward, I mean into the negative vector, and get that positioned just right. I don't want to see the hand of the player. And I don't want to move it too far like that, because then the camera is going to be offset and the bullets are going to go funny out there. So I'm just going to kind of leave it like where it was, roughly there. If I want to move the chain gun now, I could go ahead and move that chain gun model. Going to the main character model, the main character, and move that guy that way a little bit, because you're never going to see this guy's body, so all we're looking at here is the chain gun effect there. Excuse me. But the 2D position is still going to be there, so I'm just going to leave it where it was. It's fine. In fact, the original Wolfenstein had the chain gun like coming out of your chest, so I'm going to leave it to where it was. So we've got our camera there, and if we hit play now, it's probably going to crash, because what we need to do is remove some of the code that looks for the camera. So we don't need to look at the cursor anymore, so we can hit Control K on that, highlight that section, hit Control K. That means further down here, we're also going to comment out this line of code that calls that function. Control K will comment a line of code, and Control K will also uncomment. I do recommend before you go any further that you make a backup, just in case you want to undo this. This is just a fun video. You don't have to do this, but some people might want to know how to. And this is a really simple way to do this kind of top-down shooter tutorial video thing. So right back up the top, we're going to add a variable here that we'll use in a minute. Export variable mouse sensitivity. And I'm going to make mine equal 0.3. I played around with these settings. This feels pretty good. It may depend, I'm not sure if this depends on the processor. It probably depends on the DPI of the mouse for sure. We're going to make a function ready, which exists within Godot. We normally delete it when we start a script, but we're going to put it back in. And we're going to set the input set mouse mode to be captured. Okay, so it's going to capture the mouse within our screen. If we don't, we'll be able to kind of look left and right a certain amount, and then when the mouse leaves the screen, it'll just stop and we won't be able to rotate anymore. Then we're going to add in another bit of code here to get the input from the mouse motion. So this is going to be an event. This is built into Godot. That's _event. It's input event. So what this does, this is a listener, an event listener. It just listens for everything that's going on in the computer, all the inputs that are happening, so the mouse movement, the mouse clicking, the keyboard happening, gamepad buttons being pushed, etc. And we can do things with this. We can check what the event type is. So if event is input, event mouse, I think it is mouse motion. If this event is a mouse motion, then we're just going to print what the event is. Get relative. Now, how did I figure this stuff out? How did I figure this out? So, first of all, I kind of knew that this was a thing, and I did that by reading the documentation. But then I kind of need to know what an event is. So, if you hold Control and click on this, it'll take you to it. And then it says void input event is an input event. Well, what's an input event? You can click on that. It'll take you to here. And then you see all the different input events that can happen here. And then we got down the bottom here, one of these is, where is it? There's like there's all these different events here, but you can check, and I don't remember where I found it. I did do it by reading the docs though. Input event action maybe. There's somewhere where I found what it was. That wasn't very useful, but going through here, you can find what these things are. So input event mouse motion, if I click that, tells me that I can get the pressure, set the pressure, get relative, set relative, get the speed of the mouse. But what I wanted to do was get the position. And this one here, the mouse position relative to the previous position. So that's going to tell me if I'm moving the mouse to the left or to the right or up or down or wherever. So it can be used for more than just what we're going to be using it for. We're just going to use it to check left and right. So let's go ahead and just actually run this code now. Click New Game. And you'll see it's captured my mouse, but as I move my mouse to the left, those numbers down the bottom go negative. I'm not sure what that is that's kind of flacking up on my screen. As I move my mouse to the right, that's the idle animation, we'll remove that. As I move my mouse to the right, the numbers get bigger on that X value. So I'm going to Alt F4 out of that. We will get rid of that animation shortly. So with this though, I can rotate Y, and then the numbers that come through, let's just assume that they are degrees. Now we can't just put this in here, it'll rotate too fast. We need to convert these degrees to radians, deg to rad. And then we want to convert the event. And I put a negative in front of it because I found that if I didn't put a negative in front of it, then it would rotate the wrong way. I'd move the mouse left, it would rotate to the right. So this is negative event dot get relative open close brackets dot x, because we only want that first number, times mouse sensitivity. So now if I go in and hit play, new game, I can rotate with my mouse. I get some clipping there. There's ways to fix that, but I'm not worried about it. We'll get rid of that animation now. So let's go down and get rid of that animation. It is this bit right here. We don't need it. We'll get rid of that. Okay, so now we need to go ahead and change our input. We only need a vector 2 for this because we're only moving. We only really needed a vector 2 before, but we just worked with 3D because we were. And we can still use a vector 3 actually, just because. But what we're going to do, we're only going to use the X and the Z value again. And we get the input, and we're going to use the left and right for strafing. So we're going to use that X for calculating strafing. We're going to use the Y for calculating, the Z for calculating forward and backwards. So down here where we get all that information, we are going to make some changes here. So we're going to say VAR forward, and I just need to find my bit of code because I've done this before. There we go. Forward equals input dot Z. That's that last one, the up and down. And then var strafe equals input dot X. Now the first one we're going to do here is going to be move and slide. And I'll show you what happens if we just use the forward vector. Actually, no, we won't. What we'll do is we're going to do global transform dot basis dot Z. This is going to get the local Z axis, which is the forward, times forward. So that's going to be either 1, 0 or -1 times speed. So this global transform dot basis dot Z, can I click it? Yep. The basis is a matrix containing 3 vector 3, blah, blah. These vectors can be interpreted as the basis vectors of the local coordinate system traveling with the object. If we just use the transform of the object, it's going to move it in global space. So it's just, it doesn't matter which way we're pointing, it's going to move us along either positive or negative along that axis. But we want to move the way we're pointing. So we need to get the local coordinates that it's facing. Oops, back to here. And then next one, is going to be the same thing, but we're going to do X times strafe times speed. Now that will let us, hopefully, go forward, backwards, in the direction that we're looking, strafe, left and right, as we rotate around. And then that's it. Everything else is kind of sorted. Now, you'll notice that you can see the skybox up there. In a final video, I'm going to talk about world collisions, and also what you'll notice is the blood goes on the ground. You can change the position of that, change the Y value of those particles to be one up rather than on the ground. Now when I go to the next level, I'm going to have a slight problem. Oh no, I don't need to change it. There is a second camera that's in this scene. It's up above, but it's not being registered. My levels were not very creative here, and I think I can get to the exit through here. And then the third level, you can't actually finish because there's no kind of final scene. But you see how we made a first-person shooter very easily just by changing a few lines of code. You can get into there, it doesn't do anything. I've got some debug errors down the bottom there. Quite a lot of debug errors apparently. So I'm going to Alt F4 that. That's how we could turn it into a very simple first-person shooter. You can go ahead and, make the walls a little bit taller if you wanted to, now that we've got, you're not just kind of seeing it from the top down. And for some of you, this might actually work better because you've spent so much time making these amazing models and characters with these cool animations that you can't see from the top-down perspective. So very simple to just change it around and do something slightly different with it, changing the code. Like I said, do make sure you have a backup before you start this. I did mention at the start of the video or at least just comment out the sections that we changed so that you don't lose everything. But that's it. And then we're going to look at the world environment, and that'll probably be the end of this tutorial series. And I've spoken about what I'm kind of heading towards next. I'll do a more in-depth first-person shooter tutorial before the end of the year sometime, and coming up I'll be looking at some old games, probably Sega Master System games, and then trying to remake them in Godot to see how they can be built up using a more modern game engine.